File your taxes the free and easy way with TurboTax. New to TurboTax? Didn't file last year with TurboTax? No problem. Switch to TurboTax and file for free if you do your own taxes on the TurboTax mobile app by February 18th. All the tax forms you have can be assisted, all 100% free. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only. Must start and file your own taxes in the app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
So I moved to California about 23 years ago, and I got to, one of my friends got a job as a seat filler at the American Comedy Awards. I think it was the first and the last time that they did one of those. And I got to be a seat filler too. So I'm new, a college kid in Southern California, and I'm surrounded by all these comedians, recognizable people and famous people. I'd never seen so many famous people before. And because I was a seat filler, I got to talk to a bunch of them. And I talked to, one of them was Daryl Hammond, who was like the voice guy on SNL for many years. And he did the iconic Clinton and Al Gore and all the stuff like that. And I said, so how did you make it to where you are today? And he goes, it's interesting you asked me that, because when I was your age, I was at the Sky Bar on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. And I saw Al Pacino sitting there. And, I asked him the exact same thing. And he said, look around you. He goes, everybody here. He goes, 99% of them are going to quit. And if you don't quit, you'll outlast everybody and you'll be great. And I thought that was great feedback. Anyway, here we are, 2024. I want you to imagine now you're at the Sky Bar and you're poolside. And it's the summertime, and you're at the Chief Audio Officer finale event. And we do not have Al Pacino or Daryl Hammond. However, we do have the great Paul Scheer, who is the Al Pacino of podcasting. He has been doing it since the beginning. And we're about to sit down for a fireside chat. That's what you're going to listen to today. Somebody that's really helped define and work inside of this industry and has really seen it grow since the early days in the aughts before people knew what podcasts were. We're going to talk about how the industry has shifted and changed and what that means for brands and a lot of the work that Paul's been doing. And to introduce Paul, I'm going to now introduce our recording where you will hear live my friend Lizzie Collins at SiriusXM. She's a wonderful leader at SiriusXM. Kind of set the stage, meet the moment, and introduce Paul Scheer in the conversation that we're about to have. So welcome to the Media Roundtable. This is a very special edition, and we hope you get a chance to enjoy. We're going to have a little bit of fun. And have a very interesting conversation with somebody that's been in this business for a long time. But before we bring Paul up, I'd like to introduce a very important partner of ours, Lizzie Widhelm from SiriusXM, SVP, who is a star herself, and she's going to share a few words.
Thank you, Dan.
Of course.
We were talking earlier, like, why do we do this? Like, what's our why for tonight? Why do we spend the money? And I remember a time where we always used to get together and do things like this and build community and talk to each other and work on shared problems and help shape the future of this business. And that's why we do it. It's all about community tonight. I'm really excited about the guest we have at SiriusXM and specifically SiriusXM Media. We have a massive podcast network. Comedy is so important to us. It always has been important to us. This creator that we're going to bring up, this actor, this father, this really fun guy, has fostered a connection with his listeners for over 15 years through How Did This Get Made? And what I love about comedy is it's just so authentic because it's so hi-fi energy, right? It's like, it is the joy of getting out of your bad mood or getting through your day. And I thought it was interesting as I was reading reviews about his show. I love this podcast. It always has me laughing to the point of tears. I found this podcast at a time in my life where I needed to laugh more, and boy, does this show help. I love Jason, Paul, and June. And who doesn't love June? If you don't know his wife, we all love June. We might love June the most, Paul. Sorry. This show makes me so happy. I laugh, and every time I listen, it also really cheers me up. So there's a lot of good that goes into this show, and I know he's going to get up here and make us laugh, but I'd love to bring Paul Scheer up here. He is a SAG award-winning actor from FX, The League, Black Monday, Veep. We love you. We love your show. How did this get made? We're so happy you're a part of the SiriusXM family.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much. Most of those, thank you, give it up. Most of those comments were from my mom. So she's very active in the Apple comment section. Well, I'm excited, Dan. I like this situation here that we have, which is keep the audience as far away as possible. Whenever you can put a pool in between us and them, that feels like, I feel like someone's going to fall into this pool. People are too close, but we'll,
Deliberately, most likely,
yeah,
but yeah. Yeah, we told everyone to behave themselves last night because it was going to be a long day.
Sure, yeah.
We didn't tell them that tonight.
Okay, this is it. So people are coming into the pool. This is it. All right.
It's happening.
I'm excited for it.
And you're going to lead us off.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'll go home wet.
Fair enough. All right, let's see how it goes. All right, so Paul, first things first. One thing, we had a nice prep call for this conversation. One thing I didn't catch is that you're a Clio Award winner.
Yes.
And you're probably in a very small group of marketers at this party who can say that.
Yeah. I mean, no, for me, I feel like to be a part of this business, you have to kind of be to be effective, I think, you have to know all the parts of it. So, yeah, I've been lucky to work in advertising and direct commercials and write commercials, as well as making content, too.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was on the table. So can we put together, can you help produce and create?
I'm doing them every week whenever people are buying ads.
Right,
that's
enough.
The kind of fun part about it. Like, this is the great part about, I think, podcasting, which is incredibly different. Like, you may want your commercial to air on Abbott Elementary, but you're not going to get the cast of Abbott Elementary doing your ad unless you pay them a lot of money. But the benefit with podcasting is you have this like very symbiotic relationship with the ads and the host. It becomes this one thing. So you actually look forward to the ads as a piece of content in the episode. So it's not something that you're like looking at and hitting that 30-second jump button, which we all know is there. And hopefully as a job, when we're comedians, we're saying like, we're going to make this not jumpable.
So I want to talk a little bit about the origin story for you, but also because I think it tracks so closely with the industry.
Sure.
So much of what we talk about in the audio or the podcast industry, is based in New York right now. But I would say a decade ago, our business launched on Hollywood, here in Hollywood, and everything was happening here. It was the comedians who really went into the space and found out what the channel was all about. And I remember when we were just early days doing experimentation, there were really two original networks, and Earwolf was one of them. And you were already doing your podcast. You've had a podcast for 14 years, correct?
Yeah, 14 years doing a podcast. And I think the reason why comedians jump in and why we jumped in 14 years ago is because we're used to not making any money, right? This is a thing where, you get up, you do a show, and you get a drink ticket, right? And there was something really fun about podcasting because I think that we all grew up listening to radio and those personalities and wanted to get there. And it felt like this content that was so special. It was, I don't want to say disposable, but it was immediate. With stand-up or if you're doing an improv or sketch show, you're just performing to an audience there in the theater and it's alive. But podcasting kind of captured that and can kind of bring it out to a giant audience.
Do you remember when you first kind of met the channel and what made you decide to actually say, all right, I know there's no industry here, there's not a lot of money, but did you see it, did you see somebody doing it in a certain way? Or what attracted you that long ago? Because that was like before the world was formed this business.
When we started doing podcasting, it was hard to tell people what you're doing. Like, oh, I have a podcast. Or like, oh, what's that? And it's like, oh, it's like radio. Well, how do I listen to it? Like, okay, well, go to the Apple store and you have to download an app called Podcast. Like, that's how back it was. It wasn't in the front at all. But I think what was exciting about it was the idea of, in an industry where you often get told no, especially as a creative person, you have to wait for somebody to give you approval. Podcasting allowed us to just do something that we wanted to do that was fun. And I think we've retained that idea. Like, I didn't go in here thinking like, oh, I can't wait to be here 15 years later. I see the future. It was more like, this is a fun outlet. Let's try this. Let's experiment with this thing that may or may not catch on.
Well, and you've had a career that spanned multiple media channels. You're a published author. You have a book, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Sure.
You've been
a New York Times bestseller. You have to lead with that.
A New York Times bestseller, ladies and gentlemen.
Come on. This is what you work for, so I can have that on my gravestone. It'll be like New York Times bestseller and dad.
So a lot of people know you from The League. A lot of people know you from a lot of things they've seen on a screen, and a lot of traditional media, right?
Yeah.
And so what's different when you're creating something with sound? One of the things we've been talking about in the last couple days is the canvas that is audio and the things that it allows you to do in ways that other media, all media has its strength, right? But in audio and specifically podcast, what are some of the benefits as a creator that you see?
I think with audio, what you're doing, like right now, there's a lot of talk of like parasocial relationships, right? This idea like you feel like you're a part of this community, these people, you want to root for them, whether it's following somebody on Instagram or listen to a podcast, you feel like you're a part of their life. And podcasting creates this connection unlike any other media out there because you're in people's ears. You're there. And I often say with podcasting, especially in comedy podcasting, it doesn't matter what the format is. We talk about bad movies. I talk about good movies. There's people who do interview shows. You take away the premise of the show, and people still want to listen because they're tuning in to hear the voices that they like, right? It's their weekly check-in with their friends. When we first started this show, the idea was, I want this to be the conversation that you would have at like Denny's after you go see a bad movie. It's like that, and you just happen to be at the table with us. And I feel like that's what podcasting is across the board, this real connection. And I've seen that now kind of grow more and more, whether it's podcasting or things like Discord. People want access, and podcasting does give people access. It may not be as much access as they think they're getting, but they are feeling like, I am connected to you. We are one.
And when you started, as you mentioned, it was a new canvas. You could create, you could explore. It was low cost.
When we first started, just so you know, the original Earwolf Studios was in a rock and roll like rehearsal space. So we would have to wait for people to stop doing their drum solos so we could record our show. It's like, okay, they stopped. Anyway, so today's episode, they started again. Stop and wait. We were literally the walls were reverberating. That was our first ever studio, and everyone was coming in and out of that little place. But it was a fun place to be because it was all creative. No one was telling us what to do. There was no idea of like how to do anything but just create something that we wanted to do. And that's really the benefit of the space. I always say to people who want to start a podcast, well, do you why are you doing this? And if it's because you want to do it, I said, then you should do it. If you think, I'm going to get money, or I'm fulfilling a need, it's like, no. You have to know that in success with podcasting, the only thing that comes out of it is more podcasting. And that's a good thing, but you just have to, that's part of the agreement. I think it's one of the best things. That's what I love about it.
Well, and I think one of the things that's interesting, you're not the only person who's had a successful career in other types of media that's really taken to this channel. But what's been interesting, I think especially during the pandemic, there was such an influx of every celebrity in the world coming into the space.
Yeah.
But it felt like a lot of it was more opportunistic. And I think there was an assumption that you could just come in and it was going to be another channel and you could check the box. And
that was like the .com boom, this idea of where everyone gets a podcast. Like it's like you get a podcast, you get a podcast, you get a podcast. And a lot of those podcasts were just like, you get an interview podcast, you get an interview podcast. And then all of a sudden everyone's being interviewed on the same shows. And it really was, it kind of took away the fun of it because I think people thought they could game the system. But the trick is, the shows that exist, the shows that people love, and especially in comedy, come from a place of people who love doing them. And they want to be there because they need an outlet, whether it's Bill Burr on a Monday morning talking about whatever is on his mind. You know, whether it's Mark Maron doing these really great long-form interviews, whether it's us talking about, you know, movies like Samurai Cop, you know, it is this connection to, we want to be doing this. Like, you know, and I think that's, it's an outlet. Like, it's like the way that stand-ups want to get up on stage. I think this has offered a lot of people this outlet to get up and do it. And I think a lot of people in that boom, that podcasting boom, we're just like, oh, I can make money? I can be the next Joe Rogan? Great, I'll do it. And then, like, after 5 weeks, they're like, I'm not super rich. What happened? And they're like, all right, I'm going to stop doing a podcast. And that, like, that's not what it is. You know, to me, the successful podcasts are the ones that have gone on for years, have this really loyal audience that tunes in no matter what.
Well, okay, when we were talking while we're on that topic, you used a term I really hadn't considered before, which is the value of duration. You know, when we met earlier, we shared a case study, okay? And the case study we shared showed the correlation how, you know, the number of ads in a show keeps increasing every year, right?
Yep.
And at a certain point, if you're a marketer and you're measuring the response, the performance starts to diminish. But so we're trying to bring light to, okay, what is the ad load in a podcast per hour? And, you know, and how do we make sure we can benchmark the value for a brand? I had never considered, before you brought it up, the duration of how long someone has been creating a podcast and why that might actually be different. So can you help share with us why one show has 100,000 downloads an episode, another show has 100,000 downloads an episode? They're both comedy, except one's been doing it for a decade and one just, you know, has been doing it for 6 months. Well, share more.
Yeah. No, I really do believe one of my podcasts I do is called Unspooled. We saw our biggest uptick in audience after the 5-year point. And I think part of the reason for that is very similar to when you see things that happen on Netflix and stuff like that, where everyone will start watching Friends or The Office and they'll start to binge it. Like, when there's enough material there, people want to really dig in. And that's when they can also understand what the show is. I think oftentimes when a show first launches, it's figuring out what its voice is, like anything, and it should. But by your 3 years in, there's a flow, there's a rhythm to it. You've actually found what you found the show that it is versus what it wanted to be, which is, I think, a good, healthy way of art to kind of form. And I'm a big believer that when you have an audience that's followed you, like, and it's a consistent audience, it's a consistent number, 100,000 every week for 5 years, that may be better than a show that launches very big and maybe fizzles out. Because yes, you'll get a lot of ears, but will those ears actually be invested in your products? I get emails all the time from people going, what are the promo codes? What can I buy? What can I get on? Because they want to support the show. It's free. And I always say, like, the ads are here, so it's free. I'm not asking you to go behind a paywall. I'm asking you just to, you know, support our advertisers. And when people love a show, they do that out of an obligation to be like, well, that's my part of the job. My part of the job is you're giving me something for free. I will now put that promo code in. I will do that one step. I will get here to support you all.
It's such an interesting concept because, so we started our own little podcast just to focus on the audio industry, just the business of audio. So you couldn't have a more niche concept. And one of our early guests was Jason Kalkanis. And I talked to him afterwards and I'm like, so what do you think? Do you have any advice? Like, how can we do better? He's like, let's check in about that after you've done a few hundred episodes.
Yeah.
And then let's have a conversation because it's so early for so long.
And that's the benefit of audio, too, is that you can put down, like, how did this get made is going on almost 15 years. Like, we put down hundreds of episodes, and the show is constantly evolving. Just the other day, we were like, oh, I think that's like one of our best episodes that we've done. In no other field do you get that much space to play, but also it's becoming one of those things when we go on the road, I'm seeing parents who have brought their kids, people who started listening to us in high school who now are married and bringing their kids to the show is mind-boggling to me. You know, and that's the kind of longevity. It becomes like the staple show that you hear in the car. When I would drive with my dad, we'd listen to the same radio stations. It's the same idea.
So I'll get off this topic in a second, but I think it's important from a marketing standpoint, and I'll make the case. So, and where's Pete? I hope Pete Bersinger is in an earshot. But hi, Pete. I hope that at some point we see in Podscribe and maybe other platforms a duration field about how long the show's been going, because I actually think we know there's two types of customers that engage with a business, and so many of the people here are performance marketers, right? So we all live and die by how well those ads work. And when you have transactional customers that are, they're interested for a minute and then they go away. They're usually not the highest LTV, like the value of that customer relationship is not as high as if it's a relational customer, somebody that came because they heard about it from a trusted source, right?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if anyone here is from Squarespace, but Squarespace, to me, was one of the people...
They're not here.
They're not here. Okay. Don't worry about them. But I will just say that Squarespace...
We're big Shopify group.
All right. So, love Shopify. But I will give you my test example just to say that believing in the voice of the talent is really important. What I've found as we've gotten more popular... and podcasts have grown, is this influx of read this ad verbatim. And one of the things I always bristle at that with is like, yes, that might be good for a drama podcast, a crime podcast, but in comedy, what you are buying is a comedic ad. You're getting this one-of-a-kind opportunity. And when you put somebody in a box, now I understand there needs to be rules around it. We don't want to say, go out and, rob a liquor store and go to stamps.com. We don't want to do that. But what we're saying is, but allow us to put a voice and a spin on it. Because when you do that, you allow the ads to become different. It's not the ad that you've seen over and over again. It's like oftentimes I'll hear the same voices reading the same copy that I have. And what I love is when I have an advertiser that allows me to bring whatever I want. I'm going to hit my points. I'm going to hit my bulleted things. I'm going to give you the code. I'm going to give you the website link. But I can get there in a way that's a little bit off-center because it becomes part of the show, not a break from the show.
So let me get this straight. You're a professional comedian and have been for some time.
Yeah.
And you don't like it when advertising agencies or buyers send you their jokes and ask you to read them.
No, but here's the thing.
Is that not something that you like?
Well, here's the thing. There's no jokes in the ones that we're reading. I would be happy if there were jokes. It's just straight.
What if they're bad jokes? You still want them?
I mean, I'll take them.
We can send you some bad jokes.
At least I'll take the. But I mean, there's no jokes, right? And there's no I feel like sometimes I'll look at an ad and it will be like, oh, that's the same ad that you sent to 20 other podcasts. It's like, let me put the spin on that in a way that will make it more memorable. And again, it's a conversation between the ad agency, the producer. We're going to give you something. We are thankful that you're spending your money with us. We're not here to bite the hand that feeds you, but allow us to play in that space. And I think you're going to find more interesting and organic ads. I mean, meanwhile, I don't know if M&M's is here. Is M&M's here?
I don't think they got in. No.
M&M's. I had
They didn't
two
make the
pages
cut.
of things. I had 2 pages of things I couldn't say. 2 pages
In M&M's?
In M&M's.
Were there colors you couldn't say?
It was like, it's like, don't tell people to eat a whole bag. Don't make a thing about, don't ever say the word Nutella. Just say this. It was like literally 2 pages of don'ts, but it was for a 30-second spot. I was like, I didn't even know I could touch on all this sort of stuff. It was like, don't say that M&Ms could be loaded into a gun. Don't put M&Ms in parts of your body. I'm like, what? I don't even know. This is never even a thing that was going to come up. I don't know where that came from, but it was like, and it's like this fear of don't do this, and it ended up being like, M&Ms are great. I like M&Ms. I eat a small handful and I share them with my family. You should like M&Ms too. That was it. It was like very, very staid ad.
You did the endorsement.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll do it. I'll do whatever. I'm going to read it. I'm just saying that.
Did you eat M&Ms while you were doing the ad?
Hey, look,
or
if you're going to send me a bunch
list?
of... No, I can't eat M&Ms. That was one of the don'ts. Do not eat M&Ms on air.
While you're talking.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hey, by the way, we should talk about what shows you have.
Yes.
How did this get made? Was that the original? Was that the first podcast you ever did?
Yes. How Did This Get Made was the first podcast I've ever did. I've been doing that for 15 years. As a matter of fact, we just re-released an episode that we did 3 weeks after our first baby was born, and we had to bring the baby into the studio because we didn't know what we were doing. My son now is 10, so that's wild. So how did this get made? And it evolved, and it's become something. We tour around the country. We tour around Europe. We played at sold-out houses all over now I can say all over the world, and that's like an amazing opportunity to go do. And it's one of the reasons why I have a New York Times best-selling book is because people are they want to support the show. They want to support the show in ads. They want to support the show in the work that we do. And we've been doing that for a long time. And then Unspooled is a show where I host it with a New York Times film critic, and we talk about great movies. And and that show is continually evolving. We're tweaking, and we're watching numbers rise, and we're still kind of figuring it out, because the one thing about podcasting is, like, you can always be growing.
One of the things that I think is interesting, so you do it both ways. You'll do live audience, and then you'll just do like intimate studio, right? Describe the differences as a creator for how that impacts the end product.
Well, we are live performers. Jason Mantzoukas, June Diane Raphael, and myself are all live performers. So getting out in front of a live audience, we know this is something special. We've often tried to reach out to advertisers, like, sponsor our tour, because it could be a part of this thing that we do as we go around. We could do step and repeats. We can do these things. But what happens there is it's a conversation with the audience. Our whole show is always a conversation with the audience. But there, when we are doing a live show, we're going to cut out at least 30 minutes. No one's ever going to hear that. We're going to talk to the audience more. We have an opening that's special to the audience. We make it an event, a night out. We know that people are spending their hard-earned money, and we want to make that special. So what we wind up doing is getting an episode that feels incredibly organic to the location that we're in, but also we're giving our fans who've now traveled out an equally impressive experience. And that's where I think advertising can come into the live part of it as well. Like, why not take that there? Why not sponsor that kind of a show? And then in a studio performance, it's a lot more of that parasocial relationship where we're just there communicating, having a good time. And and I think that the audience wants to know what we're into and what we're excited about. And that is when I get a brand, when I get a sponsor that I actually really enjoy, it's that those reads to me even pop even more because we have that familiarity.
Okay, so what makes you enjoy a sponsor?
A sponsor if I enjoy a product, right? If I enjoy like Bombas, I like those socks.
Not here.
Great. Not here. Don't like those socks. No.
We should have sent you the list.
Yeah,
we got a good group here.
Shopify. Love Shopify.
Yes.
No, but the truth is I think honestly, there's a couple things that are always tricky. It's like a good sponsor is somebody who understands the show that they're on and then finds ways to integrate with them. We've talked to different people, and said like, hey, we want to support this show. We want to do, we want to this moment is sponsored by this. And we can organically wrap it together. We can find ways to wrap the brand. Yes, our shows that call it How Did This Get Made? And we're talking about bad movies, but that doesn't mean your brand is bad. And the brands that understand that are really great. Like we've done these sponsors with liquor sponsors that have sponsored these moments or deleted scenes. And they know that we're not saying like this, How Did This Get Made moment is brought to you by so-and-so. It's not saying like their brand is bad. They're just aligning themselves with us.
So one of the themes we've been talking about a lot, and I think we all have to deal with, comedians love this. It's called brand safety. And
Tell me about it.
Yeah,
I don't even know this much about brand safety. Or maybe I'm being protected from it.
Well, so basically, here's what happens. A lot of times, buyers will have to restrict certain categories of content, right? So it'll be I know what you're talking about. Yes. No conservative, maybe no true crime. There's a lot of no comedy. And what I'd love for you to do is make the case to brands for comedy. Why is comedy important? Comedy
is the brand that you want to be advertising behind. And I understand that there's a fear in, well, what will they say? Right? We've all seen the news stories of, oh, this person has been canceled because they said this, or this person was fired from their agency because they said this. You're talking about 2% of the comedy market really works in that kind of confrontational space. And I would also argue that even in that 2%, there might be people on the outside who are like, oh, I don't like what they said, but the people listening to that show are supporting that show, and they're going to want to support those brands. That's a different argument to make. But I think that comedy in general, everybody I talk to has a handful of comedy podcasts. Whatever their sensibility is, there's a podcast for that. You can have every genre that you like. If it's crime, if it's news, if it's entertainment, if it's Real Housewives recaps, there is a comedy version of that, a comedy-forward version of it, which not only I think people gravitate towards, but also will give you a better bang for your buck as far as ad read. Most comedians are live performers, so they actually understand how to produce in a different way. They're not reporters or writers. They are actually hands-on creators. So my big argument to anyone, it's like comedy represents every color of the sphere. It's very easy to pinpoint the people that are potentially problematic, and I would say, like I said, 97% of them are not, and there's no reason to be afraid of it. And I also think that when you associate with comedy, it actually elevates your brand because it allows you to be associated with something that people like and think is cool. And when you see that kind of connection, it makes a big difference. Like I said, there are people who come up to me quoting ads because we're just a part of it. You know, it's symbiotic with the show.
So if people are just getting familiar with some of your shows, are there any episodes that you would recommend that just really stand out for you in the, you've done thousands of them at this point.
So How Did This Get Made talks about bad movies. So I always tell people, if you recognize any of the titles that you see in the lineup, just listen to that one. The one that you're most familiar with is going to work. And the same is for Unspooled, where we talk about good movies. And right now we're doing a hot shark summer, so all the How Did This Get Made summer movies are shark movies. And for Unspooled, we're doing only disaster movies. So we just released our episode on Twisters, but we had this giant uptick on Independence Day. We released an episode on Independence Day just last week, or for 4th of July, and it was like a huge thing. And we thought, I don't know if our audience is into that. And we really are always trying to chase a zeitgeist. So I always recommend tune in where it meets you. Like if you're like, I love Dune 2, listen to the Dune 2 episode. If you're like, I love Drop Dead Fred, listen to the Drop Dead Fred episode. I think that at this point, our show has established a tone and a voice that it really is specific to whatever you like.
So, Paul, I appreciate how generous you've been to come and hang out with us for tonight. But one last topic. I want to talk about your book.
Oh, you don't have to talk about my book.
You don't want to talk about the book? The New York Times bestseller?
I think we can talk about it, but I feel like people are here. They want to have a nice time. We don't have to do an ad. I don't have to shill for my book. Called Joyful Recollections of Trauma. It's available wherever you get your books, ebooks and audiobooks. And I will say this, the amazing connection with Spotify and things like that, like the audiobook market is also a really great place to kind of pull in. And as a matter of fact, what I was able to do is use clips from How Did This Get Made in my actual audiobook. But I do love all that kind of synergy across the board. And again, when you have comedy, comedians are writing books. They're doing TV shows. I'm in this movie Twisters that it came out last night. So there are these things that you also expand your reach a lot more. Like I love NPR, but they're not going to be popping up on Abbott Elementary. They're not going to be releasing a book. They're not going to be going on tour, right? There are just certain things like that. So comedy also allows a connection to the audience and can grow your audience, I think, in a more organic way than anything else.
Okay, on that, with your book, you had to promote the book to get on the New York Times bestseller list,
absolutely.
Right? So when you had your marketer hat on promoting the book, how did your podcast promotion do going on different shows in terms of selling copies? Were you able to kind of see the impact from that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I always understand this. We're giving people something for free. Right, so now we're asking somebody to buy something, and it's the same thing with what you're all doing. You're listening to something for free. Now go and buy. Go sign up. And what I really wanted to do was engage my audience. So the number one goal that I did was I told everybody, if you pre-order my book, I will send you an individualized postcard that I will sign and make out to you. And that was something that I knew was special and organic and something that was very different. So that's what I really did. I tried to lean into that personal connection. It's the same way I lean into ads. It's the same way I lean into promoting the show. It's about connecting with the audience. It's not just saying, buy it. Yeah, it's out, buy it. That's not going to work. It's like, buy it because here's something special that only you get. Here's this thing that I can give you. And that is the way that I kind of view everything. And the reason why I think both shows have succeeded is because not only are we doing the show, we're running Discords, we're running social media, we are in constant conversation with our audience and letting them be a part of the show.
Finally, what's next for you?
Next for me, I have a very small part in the film Twisters. Most excitingly, Marta Kaufman, the creator of Friends, and myself and my wife, we just shot a multicam pilot that's completely improvised. So we talk to the audience for about 30 minutes, and then we improvise a fully improvised sitcom, and it's been actually awesome. So that will hopefully be on Amazon soon. Thank
Paul
you so
Scheer,
much.
ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Well, that was refreshing. Thank you so much for joining the Media Roundtable. This podcast is brought to you by, guess who? Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and to use your influence for good. If you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, I know a good ad agency. It's called Oxford Road. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter at oxfordroad.com. It's called The Influencer, and you'll learn stuff every week that will help you be better and more successful in this business. If you have feedback for us, info@mediaroundtable.com. Don't forget to check out Ad Infinitum, our creative focus podcast. Special thanks to everybody that's worked so hard on this, including our friends Paul Scheer, Lizzie at SiriusXM. I also want to thank Bianca, Kyle, Haley, Caitlin, Ezra, Mary Jane Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.
File your taxes the free and easy way with TurboTax. New to TurboTax? Didn't file last year with TurboTax? No problem. Switch to TurboTax and file for free if you do your own taxes on the TurboTax mobile app by February 18th. All the tax forms you have can be assisted, all 100% free. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in the app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.